The wind howled through the frozen ravine, carving ghostly trails of snow across the high peaks of the Brooks Range. Sergeant Elias Ward lay prone on the ridge, his body half buried in frost. The barrel of his rifle shimmered faintly under the pale light of a dying sun, the matte steel dusted in a fine crust of ice. He adjusted the scope with slow precision, breath steady, eyes sharp. Every motion was deliberate, practiced, a ritual born of repetition and silence. Far below, the valley was still, save for the faint hum of generators from the base. Humanity's newest outpost on the edge of the Arctic looked insignificant against the colossal white wilderness surrounding it. Yet it was here, in this quiet corner of Earth, that the galaxy had decided to visit. Elias exhaled once, the sound whispering into the snow. He heard the rumble before he saw it. A pulse of thunder overhead, deep and foreign. A shape broke through the cloud cover, sleek and metallic, wings glowing faintly with blue energy. The object slowed, descending in silence, scattering flurries and concentric ripples. A ship, alien in both design and grace, landed on the icy plain like a creature claiming unfamiliar territory. "Contact confirmed," said a voice in his earpiece. Lieutenant Avery's tone was calm, but undercut with something brittle. "Galactic delegation incoming. All personnel stand by for formal greeting." Elias rolled to one knee, brushing frost from his gloves. Galactic delegation. The words still sounded unreal, even after weeks of briefing. Humanity's first meeting with the Galactic Scouts, a reconnaissance branch of the Council that spanned hundreds of species. They'd come to evaluate Earth's readiness for membership. They'd come to see if humans were worth the trouble. He slung his rifle and began the descent toward the landing site. Each step crunched softly against the snow, echoing in the clean air. Below, soldiers formed in neat ranks outside the base, uniforms stark against the white. The landing ramp extended from the ship with a hiss of vapor. Figures emerged, tall, angular beings clad in metallic exosuits that caught the dim light in shifting colors. Their movements were too fluid, too precise. Elias had seen simulations, but seeing them in person triggered something primal. The first alien lowered its head slightly, an approximation of a bow. Its voice came through a translator drone that hovered beside it. "Representatives of Earth, I am Captain Threx of the Galactic Scouts. We come to assess your martial capabilities." Avery stepped forward, her breath visible in the frigid air. "Welcome to Earth, Captain Threx. We've prepared demonstrations per Council request." The captain's faceted eyes flicked across the soldiers, unreadable. "Demonstrations. Yes. You still employ ballistic weapons?" There was a subtle murmur among the humans. Elias caught the faint twitch of amusement from the aliens. Their translator rendered the next words with a metallic lilt. "Curious. We believed such tools obsolete." Avery's posture tightened, but her voice remained steady. "We rely on what works." Threx made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. "We shall see." They toured the base for hours. The aliens moved like predators, observing, scanning, recording every detail. Their technology seemed to breathe. Instruments unfolded from their armor like petals of metal. Elias watched them dissect Earth's weapons with visible disdain. They tapped at rifles with clawed fingers, whispering to each other in tones that carried condescension even through translation. At one point, a scout pointed at Elias's rifle, resting against a wall. "Manual targeting? Primitive optics." Elias met its gaze. "Old doesn't mean useless." The translator paused before repeating his words, as if uncertain of their meaning. The alien's mandibles shifted, a flicker of what might have been annoyance or curiosity. By late afternoon, the air grew colder, the light flattening into blue shadow. The scouts gathered near the firing range, a stretch of frozen valley lined with snow-packed targets. Drones hovered nearby, ready to record. Captain Threx addressed the assembled humans. "Your commanding officer insists your projectile weapons remain effective. We will measure this claim." His voice reverberated like metal striking stone. "Our drones are equipped with evasive algorithms far beyond your targeting systems. If any human can hit one at range, we will concede your claim of efficiency. The implication was clear. It was mockery disguised as diplomacy. Avery's jaw flexed. We accept. Elias stepped forward before she could assign anyone. He adjusted his hood, frost clinging to the edge of his mask. Permission to demonstrate, ma'am. Avery's eyes flicked to him. Ward, are you sure? Yes, ma'am. He moved through the snow to his rifle, settling onto the ridge where the ground curved into a natural firing line. The alien observers whispered among themselves. One of them spoke to the translator, the voice layered and cold. Your kind enjoys rituals before defeat? Elias ignored it. He unfolded the bipod, pressed his cheek against the stock, and peered through the scope. The glass was clear, the world perfectly still. The alien drone launched, darting upward like a silver spark, then veering wildly in unpredictable patterns. Its path was erratic, its velocity inhuman. It was built to humiliate anyone who tried to track it. Target in motion, Gwyn called over comms. Winds 7 knots northwest. Temp -20. Just 2 clicks left. Elias didn't reply. He felt the rhythm instead. The slight drift of air, the subtle resistance of cold metal under his finger. He knew this language better than any other. The scope aligned with instinct, not calculation. A silence stretched, long enough for the aliens to exchange smug glances. One muttered something about statistical impossibility. Elias exhaled once, slow and complete. The reticle passed the drone's trajectory, and his finger tightened. The shot cracked like thunder across the valley. Snow leapt from the ridge in a white halo. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then the drone convulsed midair and exploded in a burst of molten fragments. The echo rolled through the mountains, deep and final. Elias lowered the rifle. Steam rose faintly from the barrel. He didn't move. Didn't need to. The aliens stared, their translator flickering uncertainly. One broke ranks, scanning the sky with its device. No guidance, no targeting link. It turned sharply toward Threx. That was a single kinetic round. Threx stepped closer to Elias, studying him as if peering through layers of unfamiliar logic. Explain. Elias reached for the spent casing and held it between gloved fingers. Gravity, wind, and timing. That's all. The alien captain regarded him for a long, heavy moment. The hum of the ship filled the silence. Improbable, Threx said finally, though his voice had lost its earlier arrogance. Yet effective. Avery hid a smile. We rely on what works, she repeated softly. The scouts withdrew to confer, voices sharp and rapid. Elias slung his rifle and watched them, expression unreadable. Above the ridge, the sunset bled red against the snow, cold fire in a frozen world. As he turned back toward the base, Nguyen's voice crackled through the comms. Nice shot, Ward. Elias smiled faintly beneath the frost. Target down, Roger. Far behind him, the aliens still whispered to one another, no longer with laughter, but with unease. Something had shifted in the stillness of the mountains, and though the air was colder than before, Elias felt the faintest warmth of vindication. The galaxy had come to judge humanity. Instead, it had learned to hesitate. Frost whispered against metal as Elias cleaned his rifle beneath the dim, fluorescent lights of the barracks. The air still smelled faintly of gunpowder from the day's demonstration. Around him, soldiers moved with quiet energy, some exhilarated, some unnerved. News of his impossible shot had already rippled across the base. The aliens had recorded everything, their sensors dissecting every millisecond, every calculation his body had made without conscious thought. Yet for all their analysis, none of them could replicate it. That, Elias thought, was the part that unsettled them most. Lieutenant Avery entered, her boots crunching against the icy floor. They've requested another test, she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. They're calling it a controlled demonstration. Elias looked up from the cleaning cloth. Control for what? To prove it wasn't luck. She paused, glancing toward the small viewport where snow pressed against the glass like white smoke. They're escalating it. A moving target again, but at twice the distance. He resumed his work, methodical and unhurried. Same rifle. They offered to lend you one of their plasma carbines. He gave a small, humorless smile. Then it wouldn't be a demonstration. Avery crossed her arms. You understand they're not just testing your weapon. They're testing us, how we think, how we act under pressure. Elias nodded once. Then I'll give them something to think about. Outside, the night had deepened, swallowing the mountains in a curtain of blue shadow. The alien vessel stood like a shard of black glass on the valley floor, lights pulsing rhythmically along its hull. Alien figures moved around it in deliberate patterns, their breath crystallizing in the cold. Captain Threx waited by the range when Elias arrived, surrounded by a cluster of subordinates. The translator drone hovered nearby, its lens glowing with soft amber light. We have reviewed the recordings, Threx said, his tone almost cordial. We determined that environmental variance could have influenced your first success. This test will remove that factor. Elias scanned the valley. The new target, a smaller, faster drone, hovered in the distance, its surface gleaming like quicksilver under the moonlight. The distance was obscene. Even in perfect conditions, the shot bordered on fantasy. Range is over 3 clicks, Nguyen muttered through the comms. Wind shears shifting every few seconds. They stacked the deck. Elias didn't reply. He adjusted the bipod, feeling the subtle tremor of anticipation in his fingertips. Beneath the mask of calm, his mind hummed with focus. He wasn't angry. He was curious. How far instinct could carry him where logic failed. Threx tilted his head. Whenever you're ready, human. Elias aligned his scope, the world narrowing to a circle of frost and motion. He could feel the cold sinking through his gloves, numbing his fingers. The wind gusted, lifting plumes of snow that shimmered like smoke. The target zigzagged erratically, darting through the air in deliberate, taunting patterns. His breath slowed. Time stretched. The sound of the wind grew distant, replaced by the steady beat of his own pulse. The world existed only between him, the rifle, and the target, a perfect geometry of distance and purpose. Elevation set, and Nguyen's voice whispered, "You're ready." Elias squeezed the trigger. The recoil was soft, almost gentle. The sound rolled like thunder across the valley. The bullet disappeared into the frozen expanse, invisible against the snow. A full 2 seconds passed before the drone exploded in a bright, silent bloom of fire. The echo hit a moment later. Even Threx flinched. The aliens exchanged sharp bursts of speech in their own language, disbelief thick in every tone. Data pads flickered as they replayed the footage in real time, then slow motion, then frame by frame. Nothing explained what had just happened. Elias ejected the casing, letting it fall into the snow. Steam rose faintly from the barrel. "Still think it's luck?" he asked quietly. Threx approached, his expression unreadable. The translator hesitated before speaking. "You adjusted for conditions that change beyond predictive modeling. How did you calculate?" "I didn't," Elias said. "I listened." The alien's gaze lingered on him, then drifted to the rifle. "Your weapon obeys primitive mechanics, yet you act as if it speaks. Tools are only as good as the hands that use them." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind filled the silence, a low, constant moan between the peaks. Then Threx turned sharply to his aides. "Prepare full analysis. This anomaly must be understood." As they withdrew, Nguyen approached, his breath forming thin clouds. "They're shaken." Elias watched the aliens disappear into the vessel, its lights pulsing faster now, as though agitated. "Good. Means they're thinking." Later, in the mess hall, the humans gathered around glowing screens, replaying the footage with wide-eyed disbelief. They talked in hushed excitement, but Elias remained silent, lost in thought. He'd seen that look before, the way soldiers stare at the impossible when it unfolded right before them. It wasn't pride that filled him. It was caution. Avery found him sitting alone near the window, the faint reflection of the alien ship glimmering in the glass. You've done more for our reputation in 2 days than the council ever expected, she said. He glanced at her. Or I've painted a target on us. She smiled faintly. Either way, they'll remember your name. Elias shook his head. Names don't matter out here. Only proof. Her tone softened. You think they'll challenge you again? They can't help themselves. He leaned back, eyes drifting toward the distant lights outside. They need to understand how something so simple can outperform their precision. Avery studied him for a long moment. You don't sound pleased. Pride's a liability. She nodded, recognizing the truth in that. Get some rest, Sergeant. They'll call for you again tomorrow. When she left, the silence of the room pressed in around him. Beyond the glass, snow drifted endlessly, soft and soundless. The ship's lights blinked like distant stars, steady and cold. Sleep didn't come easily. Images of the shot replayed in his mind, not the explosion, but the moment before it. The quiet suspension of time, the absolute certainty that the bullet would find its mark. It wasn't arrogance. It was intuition sharpened to an edge finer than reason. Something deep within him, older than training, had guided that trigger pull. He wondered if the aliens could sense it, the unquantifiable part of humanity that defied replication. Maybe that was why they were afraid. When dawn broke, thin and gray, the mountains shimmered under a veil of frost. Elias returned to the ridge alone, rifle slung across his back. The air was still, the valley silent. He lay in the snow, eyes tracing the same horizon where the drone had vanished hours before. Footsteps crunched behind him. He turned to see Threx approaching, unaccompanied, his breath visible in the cold. I reviewed your recordings personally, the alien said. You knew before you fired that the projectile would connect. Elias said nothing. Threx's tone shifted, quieter now. Your kind relies on unpredictability as a strength. Elias met his gaze. You call it unpredictability. We call it instinct. Threx inclined his head slightly. Instinct. Perhaps that is what our simulations lack. He stood there for a moment longer, the silence between them stretching thin. Then he said, Tomorrow, we begin the joint exercises. We will see if instinct can prevail in combat as it does in precision. When the alien left, Elias remained where he was, the wind brushing over his face like a cold hand. The valley seemed endless before him, the horizon drawn in silver light. He smiled faintly, knowing the real test was coming, and that the galaxy still hadn't learned what it meant to face a human who refused to miss. The wind screamed across the ridge, tearing through the snowbanks and whistling between the steel towers of the training outpost. Elias stood beside the firing range, helmet clipped to his belt, breath steaming in the frigid dawn. The world had turned sharp and colorless, every sound magnified by cold. Around him, human soldiers and alien scouts assembled in tense silence. Today marked the first joint exercise between the Galactic Delegation and Earth's Defense Unit. A test of cooperation, they called it. Elias saw it for what it truly was, an experiment in superiority. Captain Threx observed from a raised platform, his exosuit gleaming beneath the pale sun. The translator drone hovered beside him, humming faintly. This exercise will test instinct against precision, the metallic voice announced. Each team will attempt to neutralize a simulated threat within the terrain. Live ammunition has been disabled, though impact will register. We expect efficiency. Elias exchanged a glance with Lieutenant Avery, who stood at his side, bundled in her field jacket. Efficiency, she murmured. Their favorite word. He smirked. Doesn't leave much room for creativity. Avery handed him a datapad containing the mission layout, a holographic projection of the valley with glowing blue and red markers. The alien team would take the North Ridge, the humans the southern flank. The objective was simple: reach the central beacon undetected. The aliens had drones and sensors. The humans had terrain knowledge and instinct. It wasn't a fair contest, but Elias didn't care much for fairness. Remember, Avery said, lowering her voice, this isn't about winning. It's about showing them who we are. Understood. When the signal flared green, Elias and his squad melted into the snowdrifts, moving with practiced stealth. The world narrowed again to breath, heartbeat, and the faint crunch of boots beneath layered frost. He moved low, rifle cradled against his chest, eyes scanning the horizon. The alien team advanced across the ridge opposite, their movements perfectly synchronized, precise as clockwork. Too perfect. Elias noted how their formation gleamed under the thin sunlight, predictable in its efficiency. Nguyen's voice crackled softly in his earpiece. Thermal scan shows them moving in pairs, 40 meters apart. They're running a standard sweep pattern. Elias smiled faintly. Then we'll move like ghosts. The squad fanned out. The snow swallowed them whole, blending their shapes into the terrain. Elias crawled forward, the cold biting into his palms, his breath controlled and shallow. A flicker of movement above caught his attention, an alien drone, sweeping the area in wide arcs. He waited for the light to pass, then shifted position. His gloved finger brushed the trigger, but he held back. Patience was his greatest weapon. Minutes stretched into an hour. The valley grew eerily silent, broken only by the whisper of wind. Then came the faint shimmer of energy fields activating ahead. The aliens were deploying cloaking systems around the beacon, confident that technology would make them invisible. Elias saw the faint distortion in the air where their forms wavered. Machines could mimic silence, but not stillness. He raised his rifle, aligning the scope. Nguyen marked the shimmer points at coordinates 7-4 and 9-2. Mark, on my signal, flashbang pattern delta. He fired a single blank round. The echo ricocheted off the valley walls, drawing the aliens' attention. As they turned toward the sound, Nguyen triggered the flares. Light erupted in bursts of white heat, scattering across the snow. The aliens reacted instantly, but the distraction broke their cohesion. Elias moved, closing distance with fluid precision, and tagged the first target with a pulse round before they could recalibrate. Human squad advancing, Nguyen reported. Beacon within 20 meters. Keep low, Elias said. Don't engage unless they force it. They pressed forward, hearts pounding, breaths sinking in rhythm. The beacon shimmered faintly ahead, a pillar of blue light cutting through the mist. But before they could reach it, a surge of static roared across their comms. The alien counterstrike came swift and merciless. Plasma bursts flared against the snow, sizzling as they melted through the crust. The humans dove for cover. Targets flanking left. Avery's voice crackled. 2 scouts behind that ridge. Elias rolled, sighted, and fired in one motion. The pulse hit clean, marking another alien out of play. But they were fast, unervingly so. One scout vaulted the ridge, closing in on Nguyen. Elias shouted a warning, but it was too late. The alien's plasma launcher malfunctioned mid-charge, exploding in a burst of light and static. Snow sprayed in every direction. The alien collapsed, armor smoking. Without thinking, Elias was already moving. He sprinted across the ridge, sliding down the slope and skidding to the alien's side. The being writhed, sparks hissing from its suit. Elias knelt, tearing off his glove and yanking open the damaged casing, ignoring the searing cold. He pressed a field patch over the exposed core, sealing the breach before the pressure loss could kill the creature. The other aliens froze, their weapons lowering in disbelief. The battlefield fell silent except for the hiss of escaping steam. Elias looked up, eyes hard. He's alive, he said. A voice broke through the translator, sharp with confusion. Why render aid to an opponent? Because he's not my enemy, Elias answered. He's a soldier caught in a bad situation. Same as us. Captain Threx's figure appeared at the ridge's edge, descending slowly, his expression unreadable. The translator hovered near his shoulder, but for once it hesitated, as if unsure how to translate the silence that followed. Avery approached, rifle lowered. We'll call this exercise concluded, she said. Threx regarded Elias for a long, wordless moment before kneeling beside the wounded scout. The alien blinked weakly, mandibles clicking in confusion. Threx turned back to Elias. You risked your life for one of mine. Why? Because instinct isn't just about surviving, Elias said. It's about knowing when not to pull the trigger. Threx straightened slowly. The translator's tone softened, almost reverent. Your species values sacrifice. Elias met his gaze. We value life, even when it's inconvenient. The alien captain stared at him, as if seeing humanity anew. Around them, the snow continued to fall, soft and soundless. The other scouts began tending to their comrade, their movements less mechanical now, almost hesitant. When the exercise officially ended, the aliens offered no victory acknowledgement, but something unspoken hung in the air, a shift, fragile and significant. Elias could feel it, like the faint hum of tension before a storm. Later, inside the outpost command tent, Threx entered alone. He approached the humans' briefing table, where Avery and Elias stood reviewing the data logs. Without ceremony, he placed a small metal insignia on the table, a mark of rank, shaped like a folded wing. In our culture, the translator said, this signifies acknowledgement of exceptional valor. I have never offered it to an off-worlder. Elias regarded the emblem, but didn't reach for it. You don't have to. I insist, Threx replied, his tone carrying weight. Your actions today altered more than an exercise. They altered perception. Elias finally nodded. Then maybe that's the first step. Threx inclined his head. Perhaps instinct is not chaos. Perhaps it is wisdom born of imperfection. As the alien left, the tent fell silent except for the faint hum of the heaters. Avery turned to Elias, her eyes thoughtful. You realize what you just did, right? He smiled faintly. Gave them something their computers can't simulate. Outside, the wind picked up again, scattering the snow into spirals that danced in the light of the alien ship. The mountains stood silent witnesses as the humans and scouts moved among them, not as adversaries now, but as students of one another. Elias stepped into the cold, looking toward the horizon where the first traces of dawn bled through the clouds. He felt the weight of the rifle across his shoulder, the weight of something larger pressing at the edges of the moment. The galaxy had begun to listen, and somewhere deep inside, he knew the conversation was far from over. The stars hung low over the Arctic valley, cold and sharp against the void. The alien ship's hull shimmered in the pale light of dawn, its engines thrumming with quiet power. Elias stood on the ridge where it had all begun, the rifle slung across his shoulder, the snow crunching beneath his boots. The air was brittle, his breath visible as faint clouds that drifted into the frozen morning. It had been 2 weeks since the joint exercise, and the world had shifted in ways that no one could yet define. The Galactic Council had taken notice. Earth's request for observer status had been fast-tracked. What had once been skepticism had turned to curiosity and respect. Captain Threx waited near the landing ramp, his exosuit dimmed to a matte gray. The translator hovered close, its usual mechanical hum quieter now, almost deferential. Sergeant Elias Ward, it said in its softened tone, the Council has summoned you. They request a demonstration off-world. Elias studied him. They want another shot. Not of your weapon, Threx replied. Of your mind. They wish to see how a human interprets conflict beyond survival. Avery approached from behind, her breath steady in the cold. You don't have to go, she said. You've already proven more than anyone expected. Elias glanced toward the mountains, their peaks veiled in slow-moving mist. We didn't come this far to stop at proving, he said quietly. If they're willing to learn, then so am I. Threx inclined his head, his mandibles clicking in what Elias now recognized as approval. Your presence has altered perception among my kind. Some still believe your species dangerous, unpredictable. Others call you essential. The Council wishes to decide which is true. The ramp extended with a hiss of vapor. Elias adjusted his gear, gloved hands steady despite the chill. Avery clasped his shoulder briefly. Don't teach them to fear us, she said. He met her eyes, only to understand us. The journey was silent, the ship cutting through the upper atmosphere before breaching the black. Through the viewport, Earth curved below like a marble of frost and ocean. Threx stood beside him, his tall frame silhouetted against the starlight. You perceive distance differently, the alien said. For us, the galaxy feels small, measurable. For you, it still holds mystery. That's why we keep moving, Elias replied. If we ever stop wondering, we stop growing. The ship descended toward a pale moon orbiting a crimson planet. Its surface was fractured with canyons and dust plains, the horizon lit by the faint glow of twin suns. A sprawling complex awaited, a council testing arena built from obsidian-like metal that glinted with eerie precision. Elias followed Threx through the corridors, where alien species from across the galaxy turned to watch him pass. Their eyes, some human-like, others faceted or luminous, tracked his every motion. In the central chamber, a massive dome opened to the sky. Transparent shields rippled overhead, holding the thin atmosphere at bay. A group of council delegates stood at the far end, scaled beings, luminous silhouettes, entities made of shadow and light. They formed this semicircle, silent and observant. One of them, its form shifting like smoke, addressed him through a translator network. Human Elias Ward, your people's methods defy logic and calculation. We seek to understand this anomaly. You will participate in a controlled engagement against our predictive systems. Elias nodded, setting his rifle on the platform provided. The air inside the dome buzzed with static. A dozen holographic drones flickered into being, programmed to simulate enemy patterns. They darted through the space, erratic and unpredictable. Begin when ready, said the council voice. He knelt, one knee sinking into the dust, and brought the rifle to his shoulder. He didn't think about the crowd or the weight of expectation pressing against his spine. He listened to the rhythm of his heartbeat, the whisper of air through the chamber, the faint hum of alien machinery. The first drone zipped left. He fired once. It vanished in a burst of light. The second came from above. He rolled, exhaled, and fired again. The shot split the air like a blade. One by one, they fell, each explosion echoing through the dome. The final drone tried to circle behind him, its movement almost taunting. Elias didn't even turn. He closed his eyes, felt the faint displacement of air, and fired blind. The silence afterward was immense. Smoke drifted through the chamber. The delegates' lights flickered faintly, their shapes wavering as if processing more than data. Finally, the smoky being spoke. No predictive algorithm anticipates such variance. Your choices are neither random nor ordered. You act between reason and chaos. Elias lowered the rifle. That's instinct, he said simply. It's not perfect, but it's real. Captain Threx stepped forward. You see now what I witnessed, he told the council. Their unpredictability is not weakness. It is adaptation. They do not seek control over uncertainty. They live within it. The council murmured among themselves, the sounds overlapping like a chorus of wind through glass. Then the voice spoke again. Earth will be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council. However, the nature of your kind must be studied further. We invite you to train select scouts in your methods. Elias glanced at Threx. You want to teach instinct? Not teach, Threx said. Reveal. He exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease. Then I'll show them how to listen before they act. When the session ended, the alien delegates dispersed, their luminous forms fading into the shadows of the dome. Threx remained, his posture less rigid than before. You understand that today? You did more than prove skill, he said. You offer perspective. Elias gazed through the transparent shield at the twin suns hanging over the horizon. Perspective's all we have, he said. Weapons rust. Empires fade. But perspective, that's survival. The flight back to Earth was quiet. Elias sat near the viewport, watching the stars blur past. He thought of the valley, the snow, and the sound of his rifle cracking through the silence of another world. He thought of how far a single bullet had carried not just a message, but a truth. Humanity's worth was never measured in its technology, but in its defiance of limitation. When the ship landed, night had returned to the Arctic base. Avery stood waiting, her silhouette framed by the glow of the hangar lights. She smiled faintly as he approached. So, she said, did they find what they were looking for? Maybe, Elias replied. Or maybe they found something they didn't know existed. She studied him, searching for an answer behind his calm exterior. "You changed things up there." "Not me," he said. "Us." They walked together toward the ridge. The wind was gentle now, almost kind. The sky stretched infinite and dark. The stars reflected in the ice like scattered embers. Elias stopped at the same spot where he'd taken the first shot. The mountains loomed silent and eternal. He unslung his rifle and set it down in the snow, the metal catching the faint glimmer of starlight. "Target down, Roger," came Nguyen's voice softly over the calms, a familiar echo from the past. Elias smiled, the sound grounding him. "Copy that." He looked up at the sky, where the faint trail of the departing alien ship cut across the horizon like a scar of light. The galaxy was watching now, not with mockery, but with curiosity. Humanity had earned its place not through power or precision, but through something no algorithm could mimic: the courage to act without certainty. The wind carried the sound of his breath, soft and steady. The snow settled around his boots. In the vast, frozen silence, Elias felt no triumph, only a quiet understanding that this was not the end. It was the first pull of a much greater trigger, one that would echo across stars for generations to come.